Welcome back to another episode of Decoded, a Lost Codex Podcast. My name is Jesse, and I haven't said that intro in a hell of a long time, and it feels good. It feels good to finally say the Decoded intro for Season 2 of Decoded. And of course, I'm joined by a new face, a beautiful new co-host. You guys know who this is. I don't need to introduce her, but I'm going to. Ishura, welcome to your first Decoded episode. First official, I should say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How excited are you to finally get this off the ground?
I'm honestly really excited to be able to talk about all these notes we've been putting together for the last month.
Let's be honest. You've been putting together. For those of you who didn't see our preview, our pre-patch of Decoded, whatever that was a couple weeks ago, Ishura is going to be joining me as my official co-host for Season 2, for Decoded in general. And that will allow both of us to yell and scream about all sorts of exciting things. But it could just be her and another guest on, or me and another guest, which allows for some freedom. And Ishura has gone absolute ham on these notes. And the topic we're talking about has actually been requested by Rainy in the Discord. And I'm going to let Ishura talk about what we're going to be talking about. Introduce our opening topic there.
So, we are going to be talking about the Shadowlands, but not anything that we learned at BlizzCon, anything that we know about the expansion. We're talking about everything we already know in pre-existing lore about death, about the afterlife, about spirits, and how all of that works on Azeroth. So everything leading up to what is currently on live playable WoW, although we will be situating it within the context of Shadowlands, the expansion. And this is actually something that Rainy has wanted us to talk about for a long time, and I say that because she brought this up before Shadowlands was ever even announced as an expansion.
She wanted this at the beginning of Battle for Azeroth. She wanted a podcast on death the second she completed that Throw cinematic. So just saying, Rainy may be a seer in her constant demanding of this type of podcast, and who knew that we'd be getting a whole expansion on it too.
Oh yeah. So a little bit of a spoiler, but so far we have 4 planned parts for this. So the first one, which we're going to be covering today, is kind of everything that I just talked about, what we know about the Shadowlands so far as a place. And then the others, in no particular order, I also want to talk about different racial beliefs about the afterlife. So like what the Night Elves think the afterlife is versus what the Tauren think the afterlife is. And then one on death magic, because that's been a pretty big topic lately between people like Bwansamdi and the Dressed and Sylvanas, seeing these different colors and different types of magic that we're not really familiar with. And I've seen the term death magic thrown around a lot lately. So I want to be able to get into that and clarify some things, or just like talk about it, discuss it. And then the last one, if you have played like literally any zone in WoW, which I don't know why you're here if you haven't, you will have seen some form of ghosts or spirits. And having learned about Shadowlands at BlizzCon, everyone's supposed to go to the Shadowlands when they die. So why is Azeroth like a 50% population of dead people? So that one is kind of discussing like, why aren't they in the Shadowlands?
Those are accurate numbers, by the way. We checked them, we crunched them. 50.65% dead people. Sorry, continue.
No, that's like, why are the spirits here? Why are they coming back? That kind of thing. So if you're not actually interested in what we already know about the Shadowlands, and you're more interested in the other topics that we will be covering in the next episodes, just so you know.
There's a lot to come. And for the record, what we have here in terms of notes, I wish you guys could see this. It's extensive. I don't think she intended to do 4 episodes from the notes, but I'm like, there's enough here to talk for a week. So buckle in.
It's extensive, but it's not like It's more detail stuff, and it's not everything. There's 100% stuff we will not talk about, and I know it will be in the comments like a week from now, like, why didn't you cover this?
You missed
But
us.
luckily, we have at least 3 more episodes on similar topics after this. So actually, if you do want us to talk about something that we missed, these podcasts all kind of tie into each other, let us know.
Let us
Or
know
we'll tell you that we will be talking about it
in the comments below.
Yes.
We're gonna dive right into this. We're gonna start with where everything starts, with Chronicle Lore. And Ishura, I'll let you lead us off. Here we go.
So before BlizzCon, I think this is like the most concrete thing we knew. So there's a section in Chronicle 1 called The Shadowlands, and it just reads like so. Like the Emerald Dream, the Shadowlands are tangentially linked to the world of Azeroth. Yet whereas the Emerald Dream represents life, the Shadowlands represent death. They are nightmarish realms of decay, labyrinthine spiritual planes teeming with the souls of the dead who have passed from the world of the living. The origins of the Shadowlands remain uncertain, but they have existed ever since mortal life first arose in the physical universe. Many believe that mortal souls are drawn into this dark place at the point of death, where they remain forever after. Still others hope that their souls will go on to a brighter place, rather than languish for eternity within the cold confines of the Shadowlands. That's that. I thought that was interesting reading it for the second time, and I know that we talked about beforehand how the Chronicle, as we've learned, is written from the point of view of the Titans, so it has a degree of bias within it, but it's interesting to read a phrase like languish for eternity within the cold confines of the Shadowlands, knowing that there's places like Bastion and Ardenweald, that it's not just kind of one big giant hell. Like that is actually the brighter place that some people's souls go on to.
It kind of makes you wonder. This could 100% just be different levels of storytelling written at different times. Unfortunately, the curse that the Chronicle writers have is, the inevitable retconning or the inevitable correcting of Chronicle lore. So aside from that being a factor, this literally could be the Titans not withholding, but not being upfront about places like Bastion. Because, if you knew you were going to go to Bastion, if you checked all the boxes, that's a pretty good afterlife. I've been to Bastion. I played it. It's in a beautiful zone. There's a good reason to go there. Say Ardenweald looks amazing. Every druid on the planet is going to want to go to stay in Ardenweald forever, right? So it kind of makes you wonder what's the in-lore reason? What's the character reason for kind of keeping this? And is there a character reason? Why would the Titans not want us to know? It's because they're all evil. That's the narrative, right? We're all trying to figure out what's the reason behind, and it could be could come into play with who the arbiter is or who the jailer is. There is a larger plan at play involving the Titans, but it's interesting that that's directly in the description in Chronicle 1, and there's a follow-up point that I'm going to talk about in just a second that kind of contradicts that idea that the Titans don't want us to know.
There's another section entitled Odin and the Raising of the Halls of Valor, which this is when he's decided that he wants to create an afterlife for the most valorous of the Vrykul, basically, and he has to look into the Shadowlands to figure out how he can do that. That's the other section in Chronicle. I think it's just those two. No, there's 3, because there's one that talks about the spirit healers. Just those few that really talk about the Shadowlands in concrete terms. But this one reads, all that remained was to find a means of ferrying the spirits of the dead to the Halls of Valor. For this, Odin studied the energies that permeated the Shadowlands. The knowledge he gained would allow him to transform some Vrykul into spectral beings known as the Valkyr. These wraith-like servants would travel between the Shadowlands and the physical world, guiding the souls of worthy Reichel to the halls of Valor. Yet those who became Valkyr would be cursed to live as phantom beings for all eternity. And then I'll let you cover the Odin Legend book.
In-game, there's a Odin Legend book that covers this exact moment in the lore, but in a little bit more... It's blatantly written from the perspective of someone pro-Odin. And, you know, everyone has feelings on Odin and how much of an absolute capital dick he is. But this book sort of reiterates the legend, obviously from the victor's point of view, right? From him being the savior. And I'm not going to read the whole excerpt, but there is a moment that talks about Helia helps him with this ritual. And the thing that caught my eye, two things caught my eye. One of them is about color. And it says, deep within the halls of Valor, Helia traced a magic circle around Odin with arcane threads of the universe. From the world's energies, she pulled strands of light of the purest green, and strands of darkness deeper than the purest shadow. And the sorceress wove them together around Odin until the veil over the Shadowlands began to lift. Now, the colors, I've read the story before. I didn't notice the colors until when we were going through these notes. And colors of purest green and colors of pure green, as in like the Emerald Dream. We know on that cosmology map that the Shadowlands is kind of opposite of where the Emerald Dream is, right? We have reality in the middle, and you've got Emerald Dream on one side and Shadowlands on the other. And if you draw a line straight across the map, death, decay, where the Shadowlands is, aligns directly with life and where, you know, the wild god part of the map. So the colors kind of jumped out at me. I thought that was interesting that she calls upon those energies. And the other part, this is what I was talking about, that kind of contradicts. If the Titans, through Chronicle, didn't want us to know about the good parts of the Shadowlands, Bastion, Ardenweald, stuff like that, it's interesting that there's a line later on in this excerpt that says, after Odin gives his eye to the spirit, and he's able to see one eye into the mortal realm, one eye into the realm of death. And it says, through this given eye, great Odin saw the Shadowlands. He saw life, saw it even in the land of death, and he was satisfied that his Valajar would live beyond the mortal realm. So when he peered into the Shadowlands, Odin saw life. The next paragraph talks about everything terrifying he saw, but he did see some good things, right? That was the first thing he saw. He was like, hey, this is a cool place. And I kind of wonder, because in this little story, we have no mention of the Valkyr. I'm just skimming to make sure. There's no mention of the word Valkyr or what he wants to do with them yet. He just knows
the last part.
Until at the very end, right? It's after he peers into the Shadowlands that he sees. Yes, there it is.
Yeah.
So what if this moment when he looks through the Shadowlands and he does see life, what if that's line is his first contact with the Kyrian? That's where he first saw the concept of what the Kyrian are and who the Kyrian are. And we know a lot of Odin, everything Odin. Everyone steals things from the Shadowlands. They really need like a patent office. But maybe this is where he gets that idea of and is inspired to create physically, like the physical form of what the Valkyr are. And that's what they mean by Odin saw life. He was satisfied that his Valajar would live beyond the mortal realm. And I thought that was interesting, because if Chronicle states it as a terrible place, and the first thing Odin sees when he peers into it is good, a little bit of contradiction there. And Odin being a result of the Titans, maybe he wasn't meant to see that. Maybe no one wanted him to see that. And that leads us into the final part here. We have Guardians of Shadow talking about the spirit healers. And the line from Chronicle is, not all Valkyr continued to follow Helia after Odin's defeat. Some of these spectral beings disappeared into the Shadowlands. The few who still retained a glimmer of nobility in their souls dedicated themselves to watching over the physical world. From within the Shadowlands, these Valkyr would at times guide the dead back to the land of the living. Now, I do think that this part of Chronicle was just to kind of give a little neat flavor to the spirit healers and connect them to the Valkyr and why we come back. But there's more here, and Ishura, if you want to talk about why these are in the notes here.
Yeah, well, so before the Shadowlands reveal, we thought this was basically the origin of the spirit healers. That, okay, they're just Valkyr who went back to the Shadowlands. And then we got BlizzCon, and we were like, oh, the Kyrian are the spirit healers. And there was actually, I think, an argument in our Discord a long time ago about it, just over the phrasing, because they were like, are the Kyrian, like, it was like a confusion between Kyrian and Valkyr and the role they played as spirit healers, because if the Kyrians are like the central spirit healers, how did the Valkyr come into that? Because they're not like genuine Kyrians, they're like knockoff Kyrian, basically. So, I don't know, that's not something we really know.
Yet. And I
Yeah.
wonder these are good questions to put out before the beta comes out, before the alpha comes out, to see if we'll ever learn these true answers of the between the Valkyr. Obviously, we're going to get a lot of answers between the Valkyr and the Kyrian, you know, and learning about not only the connections in their name, but in also who they are in design and all that. But it's one of those things that's kind of changed, but how much has it changed? We don't really know the extent of how different they are.
Yeah. So, I'm going to skip number 2 and go to number 3, because I think talking about Sylvanas' experience in her short leader story, The Edge of Night, is a much better segue than talking about the Vol'jin questline right now.
Agreed.
Um, because, well, just to explain, the Vol'jin questline was clearly constructed with them having Shadowlands in mind for the next expansion, but I want to move back a little bit further and talk about Sylvanas' short leader story, because that was, I don't know how many years ago, like obviously before any thought of a Shadowlands expansion was in their minds, I think. And I was rereading the essential bits and pieces of it, and I was surprised. And you'll see why I'm surprised. But in a way, it sets up a lot actually about the Shadowlands, because if you haven't read it, this story is basically, it talks about when she dies the first time, when Arthas kills her, she goes to the afterlife, and then she comes back, and then when she commits suicide by leaping off of Icecrown Citadel, and when she dies then. So it's her two different experiences of what the afterlife is like, and it's super interesting to read, knowing what we know. And I have like terribly long excerpts here that I will probably read all of, because they're actually really important. Um, so the first one is when she dies defending Silvermoon City, like in her Warbringer short, before Arthas raises her as a banshee. Actually, I thought this was interesting because she dies for like, what, like a second or something? Like, he immediately goes in and rips her back out, but she has like a pretty solid, I would say, experience in the afterlife. And that's something that I'll talk about a little later. But there's some pre existing lore that makes it sound like time is different in the Shadowlands. But so the first excerpt, to go back to this. Sylvanas Windrunner drifts in a sea of comfort, physical sensations replaced by the purity of emotion. She can grasp bliss, see joy, hear peace. This is the afterlife, her destiny, the eternal sea in which she found herself after she fell defending Silvermoon. She belongs here, but with horrific clarity, the memory always ends the same. Sylvanas' spirit is wrenched away. And when we were putting together the notes for this, I guess I just kind of assumed it was Bastion, because it's the only like happy feely place we know of except for Ardenweald, and I couldn't say you should go to Ardenweald. But when I really thought about that, I wrote in the notes, I was like, did the original Sylvanas deserve to go to Bastion? And did she actually go to Bastion?
And I think I know that's going to rile some people up. I know that idea of Sylvanas going to Bastion is, some people might disagree with it. You know, I could see people saying Sylvanas belongs in Maldraxxus, given the whole warrior and constantly fighting. But think about it. Think about original Sylvanas. Do you, Ishura, think that OG Sylvanas, the Sylvanas Windrunner, Ranger Lord, not Ranger Lord, Ranger General of Silvermoon, belongs in Bastion?
I could see it. Like, to be fair, we don't know a lot about, I mean, like, original Sylvanas, living Sylvanas is in a lot of different stories. Like, I remember excerpts where they were like, she was vain, and like the whole arrows in the quiver quote that gets thrown around a lot. But she was a very staunch defender of her people, you know? She, like, 100% sacrificed herself for Silvermoon City. And I think in that hypothetical situation, I can see her dying and going to the Arbiter, and the Arbiter is like, okay, you have minor character flaws, but, like, so does everyone. And you did this fantastic selfless deed. So I no, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, she lived a life of service and the Arbiter was like, okay,
It's
go to
important.
Bastion.
It's important to bring up the Arbiter here because instantly, when you hear us say that Sylvanas goes to Bastion, instantly you get on the keyboard, right? You're like, nope, you're ready to go. But we're using emotion in that judgment, right? We know what Sylvanas is capable of later on. We know what she becomes, but the Arbiter doesn't have that level of emotion. That Arbiter is above all of that. That Arbiter, in that blink of an eye, focuses, right? And specifically on Sylvanas being alive the whole time, she did her duty. She defended her city, not only just in that moment, but she lived a lifetime of service. How old was Sylvanas, right? You know, a long-lived race. It wasn't just like a single moment that defines that. It's all of it. Which I think segues into the next part, which I know Ishura is really, this is her.
I mean, she was also good enough to be, you know, hecking Ranger General. And I lost my train of thought. I don't know what my other thought. Oh. I don't think before she died that she was capable of the deeds that she has done since. I think being raised by Arthas and being tortured and everything that came after changed her so permanently. Which is why, like, you know, obviously everyone out there, there are so many more people informed than I am about Sylvanas and her life story, and I've definitely heard people say, like, yeah, you could trace some of her actions now to, like, stuff she did before she died the first time, but I feel like there's a difference between being capable of something and actually doing something. And I think up until that moment, when she was killed defending Silvermoon City, she had done deeds that were worth going to a good place for.
Sylvanas, the general, the defender of Silvermoon, is not the same Sylvanas as the Banshee Queen. And there's actually a quote in the previous excerpt that you wrote at the very end, that you read rather, that her spirit is wrenched away. The pain is so intense it leaves her soul forever torn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people forget the word, that her title is the Banshee Queen. It's a lot of people, I've seen people making that connection between living Sylvanas and dead Sylvanas, but I'm almost positive that living original Sylvanas, the one who went to Bastion, the one who earned that peace in Bastion, did not, or was not capable of the terrible, terrible acts that she commits later on. And I think that that's what's so important about the Lor'themar quote and the Blood Elf heritage armor, is that Lor'themar says, we will never forget Sylvanas Windrunner, the Ranger General of Silvermoon. It's a totally different character, right? But that leads us into the next part.
So moving on to the spicy bit.
This part.
Is like,
oh, here we go. I'm not even gonna talk. Here we go.
Okay, it's a really big paragraph, but I'm gonna stop after certain points. So this is the context being that when she commits suicide. Okay. It was her spirit that tumbled, lost, like a rudderless ship in a storm. Time was meaningless here. Just real quick, that sentence. Time was meaningless here. That's more proof. Hang on to that. Don't forget that. And then the next sentence. It just makes me so excited. Her whole life seemed not a series of events, but a single instant. A pinpoint flash of consciousness in an infinite void. I read that, and I immediately sent that to Jessie, and I was like, the Arbiter. Right there. She just had her Arbiter moment. Her whole life was condensed and judged by the Arbiter as far back as the Edge of Night story. Which obviously, like, you know, the Arbiter probably wasn't planned back then, but I got so excited. I was like, the consistency, the continuity, also just the fact that, like, that's in there.
It was a solid find, and it was... She sent it to me, and it was I looked at it, and I was like, Oh! It was a very big moment of, like, I'm looking at the notes going, yep. Oh, okay, what is that? And, you know, we've all read that line. Everyone who's read The Edge of Night has read that line over the last 10 years. And who knew that a pinpoint flash of consciousness in an infinite void... Dave Kozak, you beautiful man. You, Mr. Kozak. That kudos to you, sir, because that has so much current relevance.
Mm-hmm. Gosh. I mean, obviously, like, it is totally open to interpretation. Like, it could not be the Arbiter. And also brings up the question, and I do want to clarify, yeah, this was written so long ago, they didn't have the Arbiter in mind, we can't really, like, put it in that context. It may be retconned to some extent, but just bearing with me for a second, like, do you not remember your interaction with the Arbiter, or are you not supposed to? More is like a general question going into the Shadowlands than using this as evidence for that, if that makes sense. But
there's something that just kind of came to my mind here, and there's a lot of lore out there that we don't know, right? A lot of lore that was written over the years, whether for the sake of Chronicle that never made the cut, that the historian team, Sean Copeland and others, have. And maybe the name the Arbiter wasn't made, but maybe a long time ago, and I'm literally this just came to mind now, a long time ago, Chris Metzen or Mickey Nielsen or whoever, one of the story guys of old at Blizzard, said, yeah, in the Warcraft universe, when you die, there's a moment where you're judged on all of your actions. And Dave Kozak was sitting there going, yeah, okay, no, that sounds good. I'm going to put that in the story in some way. And that little idea of that single moment of judgment, which later becomes the Arbiter, that could have been written years ago. So I know a lot of naysayers are gonna naysay and say, no, this wasn't made back then. And you're right, the Arbiter probably didn't exist back then, but it's quite possible that in the treasure trove of Blizzard lore that we have zero idea exists, that little factoid got stretched into the current idea of the Arbiter. There's another part at the end of this. I'll let you continue.
The rest of this is really just what I assume is a description of the Maw. Did we have it confirmed? They confirmed it, right? That it was the Maw. But I'll read it. She saw only darkness, like Arthas. And then she truly felt for the first time in a long while. She recoiled, in agony. Here she was, her spirit once again feeling whole, only to feel it suffer. To feel once more, only to feel abject pain. Cold, hopelessness, fear. There were others in the darkness. Things she didn't recognize because nothing so terrible could exist in the world of the living. Claws tore at her, but she had no mouth with which to scream. Eyes looked at her, but she couldn't look back. she sensed a familiar presence. Arthas? Here? His essence rushed to her, desperate, then shrank away in horrified recognition. In the grand landscape of all the world's suffering and all the evils of the infinite, the Lich King was insignificant. Now the others had her, surrounded her. Gleeful, tormenting, tearing at her consciousness, delighting in her suffering. Horror. This was to be her eternity. The endless void, the dark, unknown realm of anguish.
Unknown at the time. This sounds a lot like the Maw. Sounds a lot like Torghast, maybe.
I would assume. This is like something that I want to bring up later, but also pay attention to how many times the Shadowlands is described as like a void or like shadows. I have a conspiracy theory, and I'm not going into it until later, but I'm just saying, and no, it's not the theory that the Shadowlands is the void, just that there's a connection between the two somehow.
I do like in this excerpt how recognition, she's not able, how she's blind in this area, and how she's not able to identify things. She says things she didn't recognize because nothing so terrible could exist in the world of the living. And there's something similar in the Odin backstory, things that he doesn't recognize. And I think that's a nice little parallel to these shapeless horrors or shapeless dead spirits that we're going to see, things that from other realms of the living, things that we're not going to recognize. At BlizzCon, it was stated that if we see a dead Draenei or a dead Tauren, it's because we can identify that species, but if we see a dead shapeless entity, it's because we don't know what that is. And seeing that little description there, maybe Sylvanas is looking at some dead entity from a far off land, or maybe something to do with the jailer in some horrific capacity that she's unable to physically identify what it is. Just little things that are in the story that make me think of things that were said at BlizzCon, that it's like, man, they really picked this story apart and chose a lot of spicy details.
So I think this is good evidence that, you know, before the Shadowlands was an expansion reveal concept, the afterlife was, you know, you had basically your version of heaven and your version of hell. And I honestly, I hope this is like exactly how our Maw experience goes. Like, I'm so excited. I love it.
The idea of them creating a scary zone, it's got to be a challenge, because we've been playing this game for how long? And the idea of creating a zone that makes us feel unnerved, uncertain, terrified. Like, this is
innkeepers.
No, like no, that's horrifying in itself. Never going there. But I'm excited to see how they pull this off, especially using Kozak's story here as source material for that. Did you want to talk about Vol'jin here, or do we want to skip? There's a little thing to say about Vol'jin here, and it's the little cookie trail that was leading us up to this. And it's a little line that Bwonsamdi says is when you're talking to Vol'jin and you're trying to figure out, okay, who was the one that set him on this path. Bwonsamdi says, you know, this reminds me of old magic. And then he says, Ice Crown. It'd be more than a pretty throne. It'd be an anchor that holds this world to the next, you might say. That line just went over our heads. That line, literally, he was saying, here, you want a leak? You want an expansion leak? Here it is. And we all ignored it. And there's also a line, we don't have it here, I'm going off the top of my head. Actually, I can't open Discord. But it's from N'Zoth. It's one of his whispers that he says in this expansion. And he says something about his crown, the veil wanes. His crown weakens, the veil wanes. Oh. And it's a recent whisper. And it actually might be an 8.3 whisper. I'm not too sure. But but it's right there in front of us, and his crown weakens, the veil wanes. And it's just little cookie trails that lead us, that, again, we had no idea really meant the Shadowlands, but now that we know, it's like, oh, it's right there. Here it is.
Yeah. A quest line that I haven't done yet, but now that I have a horde at 120, I have the first quest. And I didn't look actually much into it because I didn't really want, like, the quest chain spoilers, but there's, like, another quest in the chain where Talanji reaches into the Shadowlands to try and summon Vol'jin, and I just thought that was, like, an interesting small detail. There wasn't a lot to it, but just that, like, she could do a ritual with others to reach into the Shadowlands.
It's cool because she says in that quest, either way, I'm hoping the bond he shares with the gathered Darkspear can help bring him to us. So it's interesting because Master Gadrin is there, Rokon is there, Bane, who's not a Darkspear, and other Black Dragon dude from High Mountain. He's there, and they're all there for the ritual. God, I'm so sorry, Rathian's brother. I can't think of her name right there. Ebonhorn, thank you. It's interesting that their presence is important to the ritual too. Not just like, yeah, help us summon. It's like physically his connection to them, the bond he shares specifically with Rokon, Master Gadrin, and Bane was worth mentioning, at least for Talanji in the ritual. I thought, I having never done the quest, reading that makes me go, huh, that's interesting.
These notes don't, like, segue terribly well, but the next section...
Back in time!
Yeah. I didn't realize this until someone in the Lost Codex Discord pointed it out to me, but in, like, the Death Knight class hall, you have a quest line to go hunt down Salinar the Horseman. Something like he went into the Shadowlands post-Wrath or something, basically a long time ago, and...
In the Death Knight starting zone, you go to the Shadowlands to get your horse, and he's there.
Yes.
And he never leaves. He never leaves with you. He's just like, no, I'm gonna stay here. Bye.
Oh.
Or sorry, continue.
You get a quest, for, like, Neltharion's lair, and in it, Salinar tells you, "Greetings, Death Lord. Years have passed since we first met, but for me, it has been mere days. The first time you met him being in the Death Knight starting zone." So that was interesting, that time potentially moves differently in the Shadowlands, and as I brought up earlier in Sylvanas' short leader story when she says time is meaningless here, and also the fact that, she, repeating myself, can experience the afterlife in the, like, 0.5 seconds it takes Arthas to kill her and bring her back. And the question here is, like, do you think that's something that they're actually going to carry on into the Shadowlands? Could we get our time skip? Or, and this was my headcanon, my theory, that because the veil has broken and the Shadowlands are connected to Azeroth, is Shadowlands now on Azeroth time? What do you think?
I like both. I really like both because I have wanted a time skip for a while. The people of Azeroth need a damn break. My God, these last 10 years have been horrifying for those poor peasants across the world. Everything happens at once, but they need a couple years to fix their porch because God. But at the same time, it would be totally, if Blizzard's like, we don't want to do a time skip, there's their reason right there. And if they didn't have it, you're welcome. There's your reason, Blizzard. She's broken the sky. The world clock's different. It's all the same now. And I never thought of that when someone brought it up, the time going slowly. I thought, oh, yes, Blizzard's totally going to do this. It's the time skip. And then Ishura's like, yeah, but it's broken now, so what if it's the same? And I went, that's a really good point, and I like it, and I don't like that I like it. So I actually don't mind either. I kind of wonder if Blizzard will be ballsy enough to do a time skip, because, that's not always the easiest thing to do. I totally get it. But this would be an interesting way for, we spend the next 2 years in the Shadowlands and we come back, how long has it been? God, if it's only been a few days in the Shadowlands, what kind of time skip are we thinking here?
I mean, they could also just, like, retcon it, because...
They could.
Really, as much as I say there's evidence for it, it's, like, one line in a Death Knight class hall quest.
But
like,
it's enough. It's enough that they could do something with it. And you're not wrong here with the time is meaningless. Totally missed that when I was reading through the notes. Time is meaningless here. And pulling from the whole...
all detail.
It's all in the details. Sylvanas acknowledging Bastion. We're saying she went to Bastion. Of course she did. In that mere, literally a second, she was able to experience all of this emotion before Arthas ripped her out. So time definitely flows differently, and I do wonder how that's going to play. They could go either way, and honestly, I wouldn't mind if they chose no time skip. They have a reason. And if they do decide to do a time skip, well, that reason's been in game since Wrath of Lich King after we get our horse and leave.
The one thing I thought was interesting that I didn't actually say while reading it was how feeling-based Sylvanas' experience of the afterlife was. Because we know when we go to the Shadowlands, we go to Bastion, Revendreth, yes, that's what that is. When we go there, I mean, it's basically like living, but in the afterlife realm. So, I mean, obviously, like, I would just chalk that up to being this is like a proto version. Like, if you're gonna play in the afterlife, obviously it's something you have to, like, be able to go through. It can't just be pure sensation. But I thought that was interesting.
It is. Because, again, something that they obviously didn't write the Shadowlands lore that far back, but you kind of wonder, will this in any way influence level design or even the music of the zone? She said she can hear peace or hear harmony or hear something. So I wonder if in the Bastion zone or those zones, if we'll hear a type of music that we just have never heard before in a while. It kind of pushes, how far can it push the artists and how far can it push the composers? But moving on. 2.
So the next section, I would say, is the meat of this podcast. It's the most important. It's basically the realms of the Shadowlands that we already know exist, and a little bit about, like, different cultural afterlives that might exist. So, like I said, no Bastion, no Revendreth, no Ardenweald in this, just stuff that has already actually been mentioned in the game. So just to run through them before we talk about them in detail, there's a dark place, which is in, like, the Una, not quest chain. There's the Edge of Reality, which is in the Shadowmoon Burial Grounds. There's the Other Side, One Samdi / the Troll Afterlife. Quetzloon's Underworld, which I thought is a really interesting detail. She's a Loa, and she kind of makes her own afterlife. And then after that, it's a little bit more speculative. Those are the realms that we know, like, actually do exist. But then there's the Light, ? Which, before this, I thought they thought of the Light as, like, an afterlife. But I did some research and realized I don't think so. We'll go into more detail about that. There's the Night Elf afterlife, because, Night Elves have talked about, like, well, being wisps and being one with a loon. Not sure if the Night Elf afterlife is actually Ardenweald, because we don't have enough info about that yet, or if it's something else. And then I have the Halls of Valor in Helheim, but I want to say they're not actually in the Shadowlands. They're not, like, afterlife realms in the Shadowlands. They're on Azeroth. They're on the mortal plane. But I thought they're just worth mentioning, but not really talking about, because we're talking about the Shadowlands, not, like, the Vrykul afterlife, even though it's an afterlife. So, should we start with the A Dark Place?
Let's do it. Let's start with little Una. terribly tragic character, but a lot there, and a little quest line like that. I was very, not in just the notes here, but when the quest chain came out and the lore came out, and I saw like multiple Wowhead article posts on it, I thought, okay, really, how much lore could be coming from this little quest? And I went, oh, all right, there's a lot here, and for a little dead Draenei girl, that's terribly sad. But yes, here we go. Dive into it if you so please.
The other one I forgot to add, because it's nebulous, is like the realm that the players go to when they die.
Like just the generic gray Shadowlands.
Yeah, which we thought of before this point as like the Shadowlands itself. But I bring that up because when I was learning about a dark place, I was like, that sounds a lot like the place the player character goes to. And I say that because, let me actually read the Spirit Healer dialogue. I haven't done it. I'm bad. But I'm pretty sure this is the point at which Una has disappeared and you're trying to find her again. So you like die and talk to a spirit healer or something, and the spirit healer tells you, I have heard the cries of the child you speak of. I shall mark you, that you may pass into this realm and seek her out. She resides in a place where the barrier between the realms of life and death are thin and spill over into your world. Be warned. You have no power in this place. Its denizens cannot be harmed by mortals. Which obviously is, like, not really the case any longer. That is a total digression, but I do want to say, half the time we can injure spirits, half the time we can't. Like Terran Gorfine's boss fight in Black Temple, you can't injure the spirits. In a dark place, you can't injure the spirits. Total digression. But to go back to this, the phrase that interested me was when it said where the barrier between the realms of life and death is thin, because I was like, okay, if the place the player character goes to when they die is supposed to be like a transitory transition realm between the living and the dead, that sounds kind of like that. But you like actually go into the dark place during the Una not quest chain, and it's like, it's a forest and it's dark. I think I just saw a screenshot of it. I didn't even watch video footage. But I'm pretty sure, since that's all I wrote here, I'm pretty sure that's all we end up learning about it. So it's a realm. It's a place. I guess the phrasing makes me think it's not necessarily a realm where people go when they die, but there are spirits there. But it sounds like it's one of those transition places, or just like a realm that's like weirdly close to Azeroth. I'm not sure. Do you have any thoughts?
It kind of reminds me of like some place like where something lost or someone lost would go by accident. They don't get to their end, so they're in a maze, and to go from the realm of the living to the realm of the death is to go through the maze. But maybe Una and the others here, the other denizens here, took a different turn, and they're stuck in a little corner, a little, again, as you said, a transition area, and it's not an end result. No one winds up here on purpose. It's they're getting lost, and the reason I think of that is just the whole symbolism of, you know, the child lost in the dark forest kind of play. Ran into there by accident. The deeper they go, the more they get lost, kind of thing. So I definitely think you're right in that it's not a place that spirits go to intentionally. It's perhaps the spirit of the lost. Like you are lost, you were here by accident, you were fleeing, or you were trying to escape something, and as such you are in its own realm as a result.
It could be, gosh, you do need like a Shadowlands Lost and Found. It could be that not everyone goes directly to the Arbiter, because we do learn, and I'll talk about this more in another podcast, but like spirits can totally procrastinate going to the Shadowlands, and even Una does that. She has a place later, which is actually in these notes. where Una says, like, the light, it's telling me to follow it, but is it okay if I stay with my friend for just a little while longer? And then the light, like, tells her she can stay, so she stays. So I wouldn't be surprised if the path to the Arbiter was not straightforward. But the thing, there is a place that I think we've learned in Revendreth, which is where, what was it? I don't know if it's like the Arbiter chose for you and then it ended up being the wrong realm for you. But it's similar in that it's where, like, the lost people kind of end up. But I guess the point of this is, yeah, I'm not really sure what the Dark Place's context is in the Shadowlands, or how it fits into the context of the Shadowlands, I should say.
I like the idea that it's a lost and found before the Arbiter.
Yeah.
Because there's that part in Revendreth that the Arbiter sends you to the wrong realm or chose for or something. I think this is like before they even get there. They don't even get to the middle of the maze before they get to the Shadowlands kind of thing. Like, she literally took the first right possible and got lost on the way to the middle.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen for everyone, but it clearly happens for some because there's other people, things, beings, scaries in that place.
Sorry, I got excited.
No, it's okay.
That could also be why spirits end up coming back into the mortal plane. There's that quest in Nagrand about Golmash, and the quest giver who gives it to you says when a spirit has, like, a really violent death, they enter the spirit world, like, in conflict, like, restless.
In turmoil,
and
yeah.
So yes, in turmoil, that's the word. Say they have to go through, like, a dark place first, like the transition realm, to get to the Arbiter. Like, they just don't straight plop in Ouroboros. But maybe, like, if it's kind of a maze, that's why they end up back in the real world as a spirit. They never, like, fully transitioned into the Shadowlands. And if time still moves differently in the Shadowlands, that would explain why you have spirits reappearing decades after they died.
If we're going to use this maze analogy more, and they know they're lost, backtracking the way you came instead of progressing forward is a lot easier, especially with the whole leaving a trail behind you. And so that could be, especially, a spirit that is focused and has I guess I wouldn't call Sylvanas' death not turmoil, but, Sylvanas died and got to the Arbiter and was sent to Bastion, or we assume in a second. But Golmash, whatever Golmash how he died in the mouth of a Gron being crushed. Clearly, maybe he got lost on the way into that maze and he just backtracked. He just backpedaled, the worst kind of player ever, and backpedaled into the mortal realm. And as you said, timing the whole thing, it's not just an instant moment kind of thing, that the spirits got lost in the dark place and they, at some point, they're like, nope, this is not the right place. And then they chose to backtrack. Who knows how long it's been kind of thing. I like what we're making here.
We have all the details. Like, I'm such a detail person. I'm in here finding all these, like, random bits and pieces. But when you look into them, and that's my favorite thing about details, is that you find they connect a lot better than you think they do initially. So, if we're moving on, I'm just gonna, like,
Edge of Reality.
Ramble on this one. Yes, this is the Edge of Reality, which I added very last minute because I forgot about it. During Nurzul's encounter in the Shadow Moon Burial Grounds and Warlords, he says, "Come, strangers, cross into the realm of the Shadowlands." I just want to note, Shadowlands here is two separate words, and Shadow and Lands are both capitalized. "I shall deliver you to your death." And he takes you to a subzone called the Edge of Reality. You may totally remember this boss fight, because that's like when the floor breaks apart and you plunge in and bam. Side note here, that's not, like, terribly important, but we learned, I think, in BlizzCon that the Shadowlands exists for the whole universe, for the whole cosmos. It's not just Azeroth. That's actually something that was confirmed in Warlords, separately from the Edge of Reality, even though that is also proof. In a mission another Death Knight class hall mission called Unholy Attainment, the Essence of Shadow, in which you have to go into the Shadowlands to get Soulbinder Naomi's essence. Side detail. Not actually terribly relevant.
What I'll say on that, and I remember seeing that actually on the Wowpedia page, is that leads into the implication that the Shadowlands are not only cross-universe, but they span across all realities. Because Death Knights are not sent. It's a mission table. There's a lot of little mission lore in game that a lot of people skip over. I believe it's their followers are sent to get the essence of Soulbinder Naomi. But remember, that's another Draenor, and that's aside from the whole fact that portal's closed and that shouldn't have been possible.
She exists in the main universe, though.
She does. Now
it's not like. Sorry.
No. I was gonna say the models they use and the what's the word I'm looking for? The NPCs they use her Warlords model specifically, which it could have just been a copy paste of the ID, but that was a question that was kind of I remember that being a lore topic of, do Death Knights just casually send their minions across to another universe in time? And then when we find out in Battle for Azeroth that the portal is closed to Draenor, it begs the question of how canon, and again, it's not terribly relevant. It's a very minor little thing. But if the Death Knights decided to travel through the Shadowlands to get Naomi there, didn't go to Draenor and then go to the Shadowlands, they just hijacked from the Shadowlands, who's to say it's not possible? Who's to say that, the Shadowlands doesn't span across all realities and they went and got Soulbinder Naomi? I believe the context that they give in that quest, the Essence of Shadows, is that because that specific Naomi fell to corruption, that specific Naomi was one who sided with the Legion, stuff like that, and that's why they went after alternate Naomi. Again, brings up headaches, Warlords of Draenor. I know, but this could be the thing that we're looking for about alternate realities coming into play for the Shadowlands. Which is a whole other can of worms that we won't get into.
But they did say they weren't doing any alternate reality stuff in Shadowlands. And don't... Okay.
Was that confirmed?
So, I'm quoting someone, so it could be wrong. But, you're just nitpicking small details. There's an NPC in one of the Auchindoun 5-mans. Oh my god, what was it? Which 5-man was it? Not Sathik, it's not the Shadow Tombs, it's not the Mana Tombs, it's the...
Crypts.
Other one.
Auchinai Crypts.
Yes! I was like, what's the name? I can't remember. And I forget the NPC's name. But she's just she's the quest giver, I think. Is she? Oh god, I don't remember. But she has the same model as Naomi, and she's wandering. I don't know. My conspiracy theory. So the edge of reality, which Ner'zhul says is the Shadowlands, is actually, I think, the Void. Because when you get the Void Talon of the Darkstar mount, you enter into the edge of reality to get it. And they say that the last egg of the Void Talon was lost in the Void. So, possible somehow that, I don't know, the Void Talon died and ended up in the Shadowlands, and Ner'zhul people got confused, or whatever. But, I feel like there's a bit of build-up in Warlords. There's something of a connection between the Void and the Shadowlands. And when I was talking to Jesse a long time ago, I was like, you know what 2 words are interchangeable? Shadow and Void. That's a big conspiracy theory. But I don't think, the Shadowlands... I think shadow is just more a term of, shadow of your life, shadow of death, darkness, whatever. But I think... I would not be surprised if we saw a content patch in the future where the Void was involved in the Shadowlands somehow, where there's a realm that has been taken over by the Void. I mean, we have the Emerald Nightmare. What if we had the same exact thing, with the Void and the Shadowlands. It's just a theory.
It's a good theory. And honestly, the way they set up these different realms in the Shadowlands, it's clear that we can see different realms like that coming into play for patch content, and something like the Emerald Nightmare bleed over, only being the Void bleed over into the Shadowlands would be really cool. So you heard it here first. She's calling it now.
Just even like the name Edge of Reality too. Like, okay, yeah, it could be the edge of the Shadowlands, but like reality itself, the Void Lords are outside of manifest reality, basically. So, I don't know, we'll see. Another really small detail. I think Ner'zhul says the Shadow Moon cannot be defeated. We walk in the realm of death itself, which is interesting. There wasn't necessarily like anything more to it, or at least I haven't done my research on Shadow Moon or Lore or Lore at all. But just they're like the Shadowlands is our domain.
It's interesting because, as you said, the words shadow and lands are separate words. So you might I really want there to be a Shadowlands, like where we're going, connection to Ner'zhul. I really want to see Ner'zhul in not necessarily Warlords Ner'zhul, but like OG bro Ner'zhul, like the original Orc Ner'zhul. Because when we think of Ner'zhul, we think of the Helm, we think of Arthas, we think of the Lich King. No, I want to see the Ner'zhul before that, and it'd be cool if they kind of tie in an afterthought parallel, but a parallel to his Warlords version, and that maybe OG Ner'zhul did do some research and did have a connection to the Shadowlands, and in some way the Legion exploited that. We learned that there is a connection between the Land of Death and the Shadow Moon Orc clan in general, and a lot of that themed death connection in Warlords suddenly becomes canon for the main universe as well. That would be cool. I'd love that, because I loved the aesthetic of the Shadow Moon Orcs in Warlords, and obviously they tapped into the Darkstar and the Naru, and Ner'zhul got all super edgy because Grommash said you need to be cool in order to join my boys club, and Ner'zhul tapped into void magic, right? But we know that's not what happened in the main universe, so I'd love there to be a connection, maybe not as dire, maybe not as drastic, but OG Ner'zhul meddling or finding something that he shouldn't have.
I would say, actually, now that I think about it, if not for his line that the Shadow Moon Orcs walk in the realm of death itself, Shadowlands as two words probably refers to the void. But he says that bit about realm of death. So. Moving on?
I don't want to,
There's
but
let's do it. There's a lot to unpack there.
There's a lot, and I would love if Ner'zhul was a patch content. Not boss, but character. That'd be cool.
The OG Ner'zhul, bro. There's actually, there's a lot of orc lore when it comes to the afterlife, because you have, Oshugan and the spirits and the Naru, and you have the Death Knights, the first generation of Death Knights, which are covered
we're going to talk about them.
The Death Magic podcast. They're in there. That's in my notes.
Confirmed. I saw them. I saw the notes.
Gorfine's whole life story is going to take up 10 minutes. Something to look forward to. So our next one is The Other Side, which actually, I realized we don't really know anything about The Other Side, other than it will be a 5-man. We know about Bwan Samdi, we know a lot about troll death rituals, and that trolls go to the other side, but we don't actually know about the other side itself. No idea what it looks like. I am writing a lore post on this, and it's not explicitly stated, so I wouldn't say it's canon word for word, but we know that Bwan Samdi is pretty fickle. He likes people, he doesn't like others, and I feel like if you're on good terms with him, you'll probably get a good place in the other side. If you're not on good terms with him, you probably won't. So I like the idea that the troll afterlife isn't morality based. Like, if you do good deeds, you'll go to heaven. It's like, just if one somebody likes you.
100%. And it's interesting now that you think about it. Like his temple, where specifically his temple is on Zandalar, aside from the idea that a lot of it's flooded and it used to look like it belonged to a much larger city, and that the cult of Bwansamdi was actually, like, if you look at the ruins in Nazmir, the original ruins of Zul Nazman, where the blood trolls were, they had a full-fledged city, and the actual full area of where Bwansamdi's temple is, there's references to the cult of Bwansamdi being much bigger at a different time. So there was a whole city dedicated to Bwansamdi.
One of the I did Nazmir recently. I know this now. One of the ruins you actually go through before you ever go to the necropolis is one of Bwansamdi's old, like, spiritual grounds. And it's, like, fallen apart. I didn't know that originally. But, because Nazmir actually used to be the capital of the Troll Empire, I learned, and then they eventually relocated south. So that's actually interesting in its own way if you think about it, that, like, Bwansamdi had a huge influence in that region, and that region was where the capital of the Troll Empire was. I mean, it kind of makes sense if you think about it, because, like, your afterlife is a huge part of your actual life, but not a detail I thought about.
And it would have been obviously a swamp back then. So it's interesting to think that all these troll spirits are going to that one location in Nazmir. And there's Zalazane is actually in his temple before he escapes in the Vol'jin quest line. When you go into Bwansamdi's temple and you look up, he's on the roof being strangled, being tortured by Bwansamdi. And he died nowhere near Nazmir. So you kind of wonder, is the doorway to the other side in Nazmir? Is because you see a lot of troll spirits just kind of ghosting their way in that general direction. Salazane died. What direction are we? 100,000 miles to the west on Kalimdor, right? So it's and his soul's right there. So if his soul ends up in Nazmir, maybe that's the doorway. Maybe that's the I'm just picturing now the other side is this big club, and Bwansamdi's the one and only bouncer.
It would be.
And he just totally just prejudges you ahead of time. Yeah, you can go in here, but that's the first floor. That's the boring floor. Oh, I liked you in life. You did me some favors. You get to go to the loft upstairs, have some fun. It's interesting, and I'd love to see that blood moon aesthetic come into play on the other side to sort of connect. It's on the other side, literally on the other side of that moon. Maybe that's where the Shadowlands is, and the whole blood moon there. Maybe that's not actually the moon. That's just a mirage, a doorway, a window looking into the other side, and that's why there's that blood moon aesthetic.
That'd be cool if we saw that, like, actually on the other side. The next one is relevant, though, because, as I said, Quetzalcoatl's underworld. So Quetzalcoatl is a wind serpent Loa. I think she has, like, Hakar's model.
Yep.
And so in the quest in Zuldrak, Harkoa gives you a quest, and she's like, yo, I'm worried about Quetzalcoatl because the Drakari are, like, killing all of us. Please go check on her. Actually, I think she knows she's dead, because when you visit Quetzalcoatl, you're actually in the Shadowlands, and you talk to her spirit. Turns out, Quetzalcoatl was killed by her worshippers, like most Loa were by their Drakari. But when she died, she legit made her own afterlife, in which her express purpose is to, like, torture those who killed her in life. And I think that's one of the only examples we have of, like... So I'll just read you the dialogue she says that's important here. Do you like the new home that I've carved out for my so-called worshippers? In the throes of death, I curse them along with me into the special underworld of my own creation. I think that I shall delight in their eternal torment, but what I really want is to exact revenge upon my former prophet. So it's like a small couple quests you do, but it's interesting because she's a Loa, so, like, in Nazmir, when Torga dies, Talanji and the Tortolans are like, yo, let's call up Bwansamdi and see if he can get Torga's spirit for us. And actually, I remember talking with you about this before because I was like, well, Torga's spirit should be in Ardenweald. So why can Bwansamdi just, like, get him? I think someone said, is the other side in Ardenweald?
I think that would make sense, because if the other side is this pocket realm, the wild gods, we know the wild gods go to Ardenweald, and we know that Bwansamdi has a higher authority that he answers to, a higher boss that he answers to. So it would make sense that, you know, that maybe the other side and Ardenweald, there's a sort of connection there, that the Loa go, because they ask him for Torga's spirit, and he's able to provide, but he wants something in return, and we actually we don't give him, but we're like, yo, Hyrik's over there, go get Hyrik, because we've just killed Hyrik. So I wonder if it's sort of like a tunnel between the other side and Ardenweald, and that it's an easy passage. It seems weird that not weird. It seems different that Bwansamdi, as the Loa of Death, would have other Loa within his grasp, unless there's a higher power to cause that. That seems bizarre, because the other Loa, they may, you know, Gonk makes a reference that he's never going to meddle in Bwansamdi's affairs, but the way he says it is they're still equals, but once you're dead, like, you're Bwansamdi's, you belong to him, kind of thing. So I don't know how I feel or how I would take the idea that Bwansamdi also gets the Loa of the dead, the spirits of the dead Loa, sorry, and maybe just the whole notion of Talanji asking him, it's kind of a, can you get us Torga? And he's like, I could, and it's kind of like a doorway, like a window into Ardenweald. He's like, hey, get over here, and Torga comes crawling through.
I just had a terrible thought.
Oh?
Okay, so all trolls go to Ardenweald confirmed. If Ardenweald is the Night Elf afterlife, and Night Elves are just evolved trolls.
You just upset a whole lot of people. You just upset a
Mind
whole...
blown!
You just upset there's gotta be a connection between Ardenweald and the other side, even more so.
Gosh. Okay. The original point of bringing up this quest is because I just thought it was cool. Like, she made her own, like, that's her own realm. She just made a realm in the Shadowlands. Poof. As easy as that.
And I wonder, on this notion of how petty it is, and petty's the wrong word, because she's totally entitled to her feelings, especially betrayal and all that stuff. But if we backtrack to what you said about Bwansamdi, basically like, you're cool, screw you, you're cool. You know, she's basically saying, you're all dicks, and I'm going to torture you all. And I could just see Bwansamdi going, ooh, girl, that is spicy. I like that. He could probably also be a little bit pissed off that she's taken some souls from him. But maybe in her death robes, how upset and angry she was, he's kind of going, I sympathize with you, girl. I'm on the same page. You stole the dead from me, but damn, you really sunk to a whole new, like, I can almost see Bwansamdi being low-key okay with how low Quetzalcoatl's, not low, with how directedly petty and scheming she is, because he's kind of like, I do the same thing. You do me no favors in life. Your afterlife's gonna suck. And she's like, you know what? No, we're cranking that up by 10. And he's like, I like it. I like it.
Oh my god, yeah. I like F for all the Drakari trolls in the other side.
Oh my god, you're all boned, guys. You're done.
I do want to say, she's not even like, she's a wind serpent Loa. She's like the Loa of what, cunning? But she made her own freaking underworld. So if it's easy as just a random Loa being able to do it, I don't know, there's a lot of potential there. And it also makes Bwansamdi a lot less cool. Like, if that's the case. Like, if he's just been, like, has a monopoly on the death realm. But everyone can just make their own realms if they want.
I wonder if her realm is, like, part of the other side. So, like, she says it's her own realm, but it's kind of like she makes her own like prison, her own temple in that area. That'd be cool if we go to the other side and like we see reference to her.
She's a boss on the other side.
I'd feel bad because she was betrayed already. I don't want to kill her again. God, we killed Aloha too many times. Shadra, where are you at, girl? We gotta save you. We gotta help our spider queen.
She's a boss on the other side.
Don't say that. I'm done killing. I've played Horde for too long. You know how many times I've killed Shadra as Horde? God. What a bunch of dicks. All right. But that's kind of cool. I have a much larger fascination for the other side and Quetzalcoatl specifically after thinking about this.
I know, right?
We could do a whole episode on Loa and the other side.
Oh God.
Maybe.
Probably.
Maybe. But let's not confirm. Let's not promise anything. Moving on to The Light and
question mark.
one of the most iconic quest lines from Wrath, and probably emotional quest lines, the Bride and Brad quest line. And you have your notes here saying the quote, and I'll read the quote before Ishura dives into this. "Fear not, young one, for this crusader shall not taste death. In life, Bride and Brad was the bearer of great deeds. Now, in passing, he shall taste only paradise. The light does not abandon its champions."
Bastion, 100%.
100%. Hundy P. Bride and Brad is Bride and Blue. He's gonna be going there. But it's interesting because that quest line is such an isolated example of the Naru interfering. Like we know the Narus are the king of interfering, right? They are the kings and queens of interfering. There's that one Naru in that one artifact quest lore, I do believe. Oh, it's Tuare. It's the discipline staff. And it used to be a Naru, and he found a planet that was about to be eaten by a Void Lord. He's like, not today. And he stepped in and saved the day. And to me, that's kind of a big deal. You just decided to do that. But, whatever. You're a Naru. Who's going to tell you otherwise? And then this guy, he's like, this one paladin has the plague. And we're going to save this one dude. Not the rest of Stratholme. Don't worry about that. This one guy. And to me, it was very... Like, I'm not trying to make light of this questline because I know this questline is very important. And I know there's out-of-game reasons for this character. But it's so interesting because it's, again, an isolated incident with the Naru saving Bride and Brad. And he says he shall not taste death, which is an interesting choice of wordings.
But he does die.
He does die, yeah,
his, spirit as an NPC afterward, which I didn't realize until I was looking back at my screenshots like an hour ago.
But do you think? Would you think he goes to this is him going to Bastion, or
yeah?
So does that mean the Naru have a connection with Bastion?
Shoot.
I backed you into a corner. What are you gonna do?
You did.
Or
I'm just gonna deflect and preface by saying, I didn't do as much research on this part as maybe I could have. Your girl here looked at the RPG, which isn't even canon, so doesn't even matter that much in this context.
Until it is.
Until it is. But the light in the RPG is never conceived of as a potential afterlife. It's just like a religion with tenets and stuff. And I could have sworn someone out there will know, because like I said, I looked at 2 quests total. I had this general sentiment before doing this research. I was like, the light is an afterlife, right? Like, people go to the light. And Una, who I said earlier, actually has that dialogue where she says, the light, it's telling me to follow it. And then she's like, oh wait, can I stay? The light says I can stay. Cool. Which I think originally we probably thought was the Naru. But that the light was essentially an afterlife, like the heaven, where people could go who've been good. And turns out that's actually Bastion. The question in there is Bastion the light, or is the light just what people think of when they refer to what Bastion is? So that kind of ties into the whole cultural beliefs about the afterlife. Like humans, they believe in the light. but do they actually go to Bastion when they die, or is there like a light realm? Which I'm gonna answer super quickly. I don't think there is, because there's an actual bigger light realm and a void realm. So I don't think there's like a light Shadowlands realm, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense, and it kind of puts it in an unfortunate perspective. A soldier believes, an example like Lothar. Lothar wasn't explicitly religious, but he was surrounded by people who was religious, and he probably thought, I live a good life. The light will take care of me. But Lothar could easily have wound up in Maldraxxus. What a shock that is! I did good. Open your eyes. Oh, this is my fate. All right. Totally a side note. I just thought of it now. Poor Lothar. He could go to Bastion, but Maldraxxus fits him as well. Moving on to the Night Elf afterlife, the Ardenweld. There's a lot here. There's a lot, but there's not.
There's like a lot in kind of Night Elf beliefs about what the afterlife is. I say a lot, but like it's not really much other than, okay, we know when Night Elves die, they become wisps. There's the quest Wisp in the Willows, where it said, wisps are the spirits of our night elven brethren who have become one with the forest. So not every night elf, but a few, pretty much. And then what's interesting is you can actually kill wisps again, but you can also kill spirits again, so I don't know if that's like a major detail. In Elegy, the novella kind of describes the Night Elf afterlife in vague terms as the realm of wisps and shadows. And just like details about the Night Warrior, about how one of Elune's aspects is the Night Warrior, who takes the valiant among the dead and sets them riding across the sky of stars, which we saw in the end of Valshra's main storyline with Ysera. So it's like, something I didn't put in my notes. There's an NPC in Darkshore named Yalda, and she's a ghost, and she says, I decided to stick around and not pass on to be with the goddess. So also that, like, their afterlife. I remember this being mentioned in our Discord. Someone wanted to clarify, Elune is not necessarily a god of the dead. We don't know if she's, like, in their afterlife. We just kind of assume she is. But I guess that quest, like, passing on to be with the goddess, or, like, you'll be in the goddess's arms now kind of thing, that Elune is somehow in their afterlife. But there's not enough information in my opinion. Like, Ardenweald feels like the most sensical option, because druids and nature, and we know Tyrande will be there. But I just don't feel like these quests even tell us enough to say, oh, maybe the Night Elves have their own separate realm, or it's just Ardenweald.
I hope we get those answers, especially in Ardenweald, and it's there's I got a couple of headcanon thoughts on Ardenweald, but this isn't the time to bring it up. But I do wonder if we're going to be seeing active wisps or spirits, or if those wisps can take on the forms of who they were once in life, and we kind of get, I don't know, maybe there's like a big tree with a portal into it, and the wisps go in and out, and that's how they get to the mainland. And some wisps go to Ardenweald to recover or regenerate. Some, because we know it's the land of regeneration with the wild gods. I wonder what the connection is there. I hope we get those answers.
Yeah. Also, I like ran into that and was like, yeah, the Night Elf afterlife is Ardenweald, but also like your cultural afterlives don't have to be actual realms in the Shadowlands. I just like thinking of it in those terms, because we have places like the Other Side, which is ostensibly the troll afterlife. We have places like the Halls of Valor and Helheim, which are obviously like the Vrykul afterlife, and even the Light, which may or may not be the human afterlife. So I was thinking of it in those terms, which may be too limited. What's next on the list are the Halls of Valor and Helheim, but because they're not really in the Shadowlands, I want to skip them,
That's
unless you want to say anything
nope,
about them.
nope. It's the one quick note I'll say is it's explicitly stated in Chronicle that Helheim was created at the bottom of the coldest seas, so it's physically on the realm of the mortal realm, where we don't really know, but and then the halls of Valor were literally lifted into the sky. So they are realms of the dead, and they are magical in their own sense. Like Odin created the Fields of Eternal Hunt, this massive enchanted forest and mountain range. And we know that Helheim seems to go on for a long time. You know, there's that whole ocean, the big giant boat. But it's not exactly the Shadowlands. But you never know what kind of connection could be there. But I'm cool with skipping them.
Yeah, I mean, they're like afterlives, but in the sense of this is a podcast about what we know so far about the Shadowlands. Like, they ain't the Shadowlands.
Agreed.
So.
Agreed. Motion to
They
skip
are there.
approved.
And they're like relevant in terms of the spirits of the Rykul are ferried to them from the Shadowlands, but we already discussed that pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So everything after this is kind of just like random tidbits. I have a section on Una, who we kind of already talked about, but in more detail, like the description of her doll. Una was found bound to an Urzul and was released into the Shadowlands, where she wandered in the utter darkness. That's kind of it. That's just like more expanding on the scenario we've already talked about. But like basically it says she was released into the Shadowlands. This is an interesting bit of lore. The Day of the Dead.
This two-parter.
November 1st. The quote, I think for the holiday, like the holiday flavor description, can you feel it? The spirit world draws close during the Day of the Dead. The Shadowlands draws close during the Day of the Dead. I just like small tidbit of lore. But we were kind of joking around. We were like,
what if
Day of the Dead release date for Shadowlands confirmed?
And if you line it up with BlizzCon, like if you take this little funny fact, it ends on November 3rd, 2020, which we know that the first official weekend of BlizzCon, the Friday, Saturday, the 6th and 7th, there's already a convention going on that weekend, I do believe. So it's not against the realms of possibility that BlizzCon itself could be October 31st, thus allowing for the Tuesday release after BlizzCon on the Day of the Dead for the Shadowlands. Maybe. I kind of want Shadowlands to drop before BlizzCon, but it just a little note. Ishura and I were laughing about the other day going, what if? Can you imagine? That's kind of a funny thought.
Yeah. Also just that, like, the spirit world draws close. Well, now it's really close. It's literally, like, up there.
It's a giant hole in the sky.
That aside. Everything else in the notes is just, like, random miscellaneous stuff. I was kind of going through and picking out mentions of ghosts, but I think those might be better suited for the podcast on spirits and ghosts. Obviously, we haven't talked about Muezala yet, who's not actually in notes for the other podcasts at this time. But we'll
add him.
Still, yeah, kind of a nebulous figure. Like, we don't really know, I would say, a lot about him, other than speculation that he is the figure that discussed Odin's eyeball with Odin. That was a horrible way to phrase that story.
I loved it.
Something else actually that I thought was interesting. Another troll quest, because all the interesting death lore is troll lore. Jindo the Godbreaker in the quest Break the Godbreaker. When Jindo was last ripped from this world, he survived as a shade, weak and broken in the spirit world. But Jindo always had power over the spirits. One by one, he broke them to his will, and with each soul devoured, Jindo got closer to ripping a hole through to this world. He does rip a hole through to this world, because you have to kill him in this quest. But that was interesting. Just that like someone could legitimately rip a hole through the Shadowlands into the mortal plane. But also, talking about he gets more power the more souls he devours, 100% anima.
And I just thought of it now. Also, side note, little disappointed you didn't do the troll voice. You didn't read it in the full troll voice.
I can't do a troll voice.
But that's okay. Joking aside, something that just occurred to me with that, and the souls that he's devouring, he would not be on the VIP list for the other side for one Somdi if he's devouring all those souls. He is not getting a good seat in that club. Do you sit at clubs? I don't know. He's not getting a good spot by the bar, whatever. Because I totally didn't even think of that until now while just reading that. But Jindo always had power over the spirits. One by one, he broke them to his will, and with each soul devoured, Jindo got closer to ripping a hole through to this world. Buon Zombie's not going to be happy with that. So I wonder, we're going to see our bro Jindo again.
Oh god.
Maybe. A lot of dead trolls.
Yeah. But I'm not complaining.
No, neither am I.
There's a few quests where we go into the Shadowlands. I didn't actually compile them, but just off the top of my head, there's one in Grizzly Hills where you have troll ruins off to the right side, and there's like something going on there, and one of the quest givers is like, okay, go ring this gong, a guy will appear, kill you, you'll go into the Shadowlands, and you'll make everything right. Nothing really worth mention in that quest chain. Obviously, there's Quetzaloons, where we go into the Shadowlands for her afterlife. And then there's a quest where we have to go find Azure Ghost, and he's dead as a spirit having his fling with the spirit healer. You go into the Shadowlands then, and Anara, the spirit healer, is like, you don't belong here. When you're done talking to him, I'm going to send you back. And there's other quests too, but those are just like we've been there as the player character before, but it's been the version of the Shadowlands that happens when you wipe on a boss. You know, everything is just like muted colors, and it's basically Azeroth with a cool skybox. It's like that. So, have we been into the actual Shadowlands as the players yet? Probably not, because the only way we get there is through the Arbiter judging us, right?
Just like the lobby. We've been to the lobby.
Yes.
We haven't gone into the elevator yet.
So, I wanted to ask this question at BlizzCon, but never got around to it because I thought it had been answered and then realized, no, I don't think it has. Basically, what is that place we go to when we as the player character die? Like, you could easily say, yeah, it's a place of transition. Like, maybe the spirit healer takes you from there to the Arbiter.
What if you go there only because you're not meant to pass on?
Maybe. That too. Like, it could be...
It's just that the spirit healers who help us are kind of just sitting there, and anyone who appears there, they know, you're here, you shouldn't be here, go back to the realm. Like, go back to, instead of going to the first, going up in the elevator, you accidentally went down. She's like, no, go back to the lobby. So...
That would make a lot of sense. Like, to fit it in like that.
And that's why it just looks like wherever you are in the world. You died, you got ripped apart by a knoll, and the spirit was like, nah, that's not supposed to happen. Was you just see muted Eloin Forest kind of thing, and
it's Westfall.
It's everyone's death is Westfall.
No, but like because Westfall's the default graveyard, like if you fall through the world, you go to Westfall. Westfall is the Shadowlands realm.
100%.
Oh
God. I'm just imagining the spirit healer as like a Defias or something. But yeah, no, I thought it's probably something along those lines, in that anyone who dies and they're not supposed to probably go there, because if you die and you're supposed to, you probably go right to the Arbiter, right? And it's or you're supposed to go to the Arbiter. It's an instant.
Yeah.
So if you die and it's not meant to be, maybe there's a filtration system that it's like, you ended up here, you get tossed back in. Try harder, try to die harder. this wasn't your time kind of thing. So who knows? That would be an interesting question to get an actual answer on, though.
Because when you die in like Kul Tiras and Zandalar, you have Bwonsamdi, and he's like, "You're an idiot."
He does mock you,
and then sends you back. So I could 100% see. And it's also like, why Bwonsamdi? Like, I feel like he has a bigger pull in the Shadowlands as a whole than we think he does, because we usually associate him with the other side. But like, there's more going on there. Oh my god, he and the Arbiter are totally pals. They like have to be for him to get everyone that's a troll on the other side, regardless of judgment.
Bwonsamdi shows up to her game night every week. She hosts a D&D, and he shows up. He always brings snacks. There's also other spirit healers in that when you die in the islands, you have a little Gorlock.
Oh yeah.
No, not a Gorlock. A little deep sea Murloc. And what was the other one? When you die in Helheim, it's a dark Valkyr.
But they could become Kyrian. So maybe we just see them as their like OG form. Because maybe it works the same way as like we don't know what a Kyrian looks like, so we can't actually process what they look like to us. They just look like their original form.
How come they look like spirit healers though?
Because have you seen a Kyrian? You have.
I have.
A Kyrian looks exactly like a spirit healer.
True. But
are you saying, why do we see spirit healers as Kyrians?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Oh. I just got Bwonsamdi'd. I'm a fool.
But on that note, the other spirit healers that change forms, Naru on Argus, when you die, it's an Elder Naru. It's not a spirit healer. And the islands, it's a little Murloc. Bwonsamdi is for Zandalar, and there's another one, Dark Valkyr for Helheim. That's all I can think of right now. But they do change form. Why Murloc? Why is there a Murloc spirit healer? What did he do? Who is he? I want lore on that Murloc. Tell me who that Murloc is. But the Naru is cool. I thought the Naru was a cool touch when you died on Argus and you...
Yeah. It's like kind of more evidence toward the whole light afterlife. Because we know in that one Ice Crown quest, that the Naru have in some sense of the word, some bearing on bringing people to the afterlife.
And it'd be cool to see a little bit expanded. Right now, the current flavor of Naru that's on everyone's mouth is, of course, Zira and the Lightforge alternate Draenei, right? Everyone sees the Naru as inherently evil now because of that one cinematic, and it's like, okay, we get it. Zira was the prime Naru, and she was, a prime A bitch. We get that. But in other situations where the Naru have done a lot of good things, everyone just forgets about that. That one Naru, Tuare, who saved that entire planet when the Void Lord showed up? No. Ignore that. Zira attacked Illidan, and therefore she's mean. Everyone takes the most recent exposure to the Naru, and unfortunately, all the good that they did is kind of thrown out the window. So I would like to see a little bit touched on. I don't think we're getting our Naru expansion right now, but I would like to see a little bit of, was there more with that whole Bride and Brad quest line than we suspect? Who knows?
It would be so cool if we saw him again.
It would be. It would be really cool.
I'm pretty sure he would become a Kyrian in like 2 seconds, though. Like, he's totally the type of person to be like, yeah, I'll forget my previous life. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's friggin' go.
So, that's pretty much it, really.
That was a lot. We've been going for about for the episode 1. We've been going for an hour and 40 minutes. We've been going for. Yeah. So I do recall you saying it's not going to be that long. Nope. But that's okay.
Wrong.
That's okay. That's what these podcasts are for. The amount of people who love the longer podcasts definitely that's the wrong word. Outnumber those who don't like the longer podcasts. And so our goal for Decoded season 2 is to really really sell the notion that this is a podcast. And we talked about this before we started filming, about whether or not we're going to include pictures, and we realized that this is going to be on iTunes. This will one day be on, hopefully on Spotify, up on SoundCloud, but it's also going to be on YouTube for those who want to listen to it. It's not something I at least expect anyone to watch the full hour and 45 minutes of watching our faces. It's more of a something you put on in the background. I mean, if you do decide to watch it, hey, great. I mean, look at Ishura's makeup right now. Like, it's an amazing look, right? You get to see my reactions to everything she's saying, and as I point dramatically into the box next to me. Stupid things like that. But if you don't, for the record, Ishura, you can't see me right now, but I did just dramatically point in your direction. If you don't watch the actual video part, you're not missing anything. There's no visuals that are going to be up on screen. And so for those of you listening to the audio of this, we don't want to make it seem like if you listen on Spotify or iTunes, you're watching the lesser version because you're missing out. The only thing you're missing out on is our faces. And while that is a crime in some way, don't worry, we're not showing any special visuals.
Yeah. These are dense topics.
They are.
So they're gonna be long, but they're a lot more structured and a lot more cohesive than the Decodeds have been in the past. I don't think we actually veered off topic more than maybe twice.
That's a record. I
just have really detailed notes.
They're very detailed. I have three other tabs open with the next 3 episodes all lined up, so you guys are in for a treat. Rainey, you wanted a death podcast. Buckle up. This ride just started, and I hope you guys are excited as I am, at least for this, and I know Ishura is very excited to dive into this, just the starting topic. And once these 4 are done, oh my God, there are so many things, so many guests we can bring on, so many topics that we can discuss. A lot of speculation, a lot of just funny topics we can talk about. You know, people want to see the RP podcast come back. Hell yeah, we're going to talk about RP. And I couldn't be more excited to dive into this with a proper co-host. And I didn't explain this in the beginning, but having a guest co-host was fun. But people's schedules aren't reliable, and I can't rely on them. I'm not trying to sound as negative as I am. I can't rely on them to set aside their real life for my podcast at the drop of a hat or not much notice. And so it became a chore to do the podcast. And I can't imagine me rambling to myself for 2 hours is entertaining in podcast form. I do it on stream for God knows how long. But I'm at least talking to you guys. When it's just me on podcast, God, that was a struggle. And so having someone here as my number 2, or sometimes going to be the number 1 because I won't be here, or it'll be me instead, having that option and freedom is really going to be good. The Decoded podcast has a new queen. So Jack, sit down. There's a new Decoded queen here.
Oh my God.
And she's here to stay. But I'm so happy that we were able to finally get this, and we promised before the end of the year, and this will go out on December 31st, 2019. We did it with only hours to spare. Anything you'd like to say?
We recorded it before the new year.
Oh no, I'm getting this out before the end of the year. I'm keeping my promise. So this is going to be out very soon. Obviously if you listen to this, it's already out. But thank you guys for tuning into Season 2, Episode 1 of Decoded, a Lost Codex podcast. Ishura, any final closing thoughts?
Are we doing these weekly or bi-weekly so people know?
We haven't talked about that. I want to say bi-weekly to start us off, but we might actually start doing them week. We got to figure out a schedule with that and Lost Codex Legends. I'm going to say bi-weekly only because January is going to be busy, because something called 8.3 is dropping soon, and there may be a lot of things to pick apart in that. And you can bet your behinds that if there's a cinematic, it's going to be me and this girl talking about it. So I'm going to say bi-weekly to start. I'm open to doing it later on, but I'm going to start everyone off tragic and say bi-weekly.
Realistic expectations.
Realistic expectations. So, aim low so that when I hit high, no one's expectations are lost. So that's how that's just the way you do it. So we'll start off with every 2 weeks. And as we get into the flow of things, if we start getting ahead of ourselves, we start getting notes all written, I want to definitely, veering off topic a little bit, I want to get a head start on Lost Codex Legends a little bit. So yeah, let's say every 2 weeks, and then we'll see what happens from there. If these start to be fun and we are able to do these more often, I'm open to it. I know she's open to it. So we'll see how that plays in the weeks to come.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us for this opening episode of Season 2, Episode 1 of Decoded. My name is Jesse.
I'm Ishura.
And we'll see you guys next time for Episode 2, also on Death in the Shadowlands. So buckle up. There's a hell of a lot more to come. We'll see you next time, guys.